I know it's hard to boil down a book into, sound bites, but kind of tell me, if you would, your theory that Leonardo da Vinci faked the Shroud of Turin, basically.
Well, we started from the premise that even the believers in the authenticity of the shroud said rather dismissively, if this is a fake, it could only have been created by Leonardo da Vinci or somebody of his genius. So when we were we set ourselves a somewhat ambitious task, we thought, of finding out who created the shroud. We thought, well, we'll start with Leonardo just to eliminate him, and we stopped with Leonardo because the evidence started stacking up that actually he was in it up to his neck. So basic, and as the years progressed, we actually found more evidence to link him with the shroud. So basically, Leonardo did it, as far as we're concerned. And how?
Yeah, it's always one of those things where, when you soundbite it, it sounds crazy.
Yeah, yeah.
But we soundbite it anyway. It's basically, I mean, we set out to find out how the shroud image was created, because that's the thing. And this was just after the carbon dating in 1988, when a lot of people had dismissed it. They said, oh, it's not 2,000 years old, therefore it's a fake, therefore it's not interesting. And we actually thought, in a way, it almost makes it more interesting, because the dates the carbon dating had come up with, they still hadn't explained how the image was created. Our theory, our conclusions on how the image was created, this apparently miraculous image with all these properties that you can't explain, particularly the fact it looks so much more lifelike in photographic negative. We actually think, strange it may sound, that the image on the shroud behaves like a photograph because that's exactly what it is. It's actually produced by a rudimentary photographic process. So we're saying it's essentially a 500-year-old photograph. As to who did it, we're saying it's a 500-year-old photograph by Leonardo da Vinci. And if that doesn't sound crazy enough, we're saying it's a 500-year-old photograph of Leonardo da Vinci, because he used his own face as the model, because that's the kind of thing he did. And they put it in a soundbite like that. It does sound crazy, but we've amassed lots of evidence for all three parts of that. And particularly the connection with Leonardo, the similarity to Leonardo, it looks like him.
Yeah.
And it's not only us that have seen this. Some people who totally believe the shroud is genuine, still completely independently of us, have said, but he does look an awful lot like Leonardo da Vinci.
Yes, and we say, yes, there's a reason for that, yeah. I mean, yes, it does sound absolutely crazy, but we were also the first people ever to publish our findings when we had actually done hands-on work, and we were the first people to have recreated all the so-called miraculous characteristics of the shroud, doing our own, if you like, shroud replications, well, it was Clive and his brother, actually. I didn't, but no, I mean, it was a long process, and but I mean, we're using techniques and ingredients that Leonardo would have had, and we knew, it's a matter of record in his notebooks that he was obsessed with optics and light, and he built his own camera obscura. There's a drawing of it in his notebooks, and he also was, as I say, obsessed with trying to create the most lifelike image. And of course, people would say, well, yes, the most lifelike painting, but why would he stop at that?
Right.
Yeah.
I wonder, and what do you, and back to the carbon testing, what accounts for the difference in years from Leonardo's life and the carbon testing?
Well, the first thing we always say is that the carbon dating, those who believe the shroud's authentic are saying the carbon dating was a lot more out than we are.
Mm.
But essentially, we actually had a little debate with one of the scientists at Oxford who actually did the carbon dating, because he said exactly that point. The carbon dating is actually a bit early for us, a couple of 100 years too early. And our response to that was, Leonardo da Vinci is a bit of a genius.
Mm.
If he was supposed to be creating a relic that was 1500 years old, he's not going to use a fresh bit of cloth. He's going to use an old bit.
Mm.
So it's not too out. And the same guy, Edward Hall at Oxford, did say he would accept a date as late as 1500 for the carbon dating, which actually is within Leonardo's time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not far out. And if you accept to use an old bit of cloth, which say he would have done, he would have. He's a genius.
It's not the cloth that's the point.
As you go down the rabbit hole, which I have done over the past few days, it's so weird, some of the mysterious characteristics of it, right?
Yeah, but actually some of the mysterious characteristics of the shroud image, first of all, prove it's a fake. I mean, people talk about the carbon dating till they're blue in the face, but basically, if you look at the image, just with, with childlike eyes, no preconceptions, various things become very obvious. One is that the man is exceptionally tall. And we know exactly how tall he is because, long story, but we did actually test it. It's he's 6'8" at the front and 6'10" at the back. Now, for two reasons, that's very odd.
I thought he was 5'10".
No.
The actual measurements.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all these kind of, those who want to believe the shroud is genuine will find, the smallest thing that seems to support it being genuine and magnify that, while they completely ignore or try to explain away things that don't fit. And the thing is, the height of the man on the shroud, they make sort of guesses about how the cloth was draped and how the cloth may have expanded over the centuries in between, with no evidence for this.
Yeah.
But you actually measure it, is 6'8" at the front, and as Lynn said, 6'10" at the back.
Yeah.
The front and back images, which are supposedly created at the same time, don't actually match up anyway.
No, they don't. Can I just jump in and say another really peculiar thing about the shroud, if you're looking at it with, with new eyes, is that at the front the head is like that, and at the back it's like that. So
there's all kinds of anomalies that point to it being a created image.
Yeah.
And one of the most obvious, when we first started looking at it, was realizing that however the image was created, the shroud must have been flat at the time. It couldn't have wrapped a body, because if it had been in contact with the body, however the image may have been formed, if it's wrapping a body, and particularly the face, with all the kind of contours of the face, when you take the cloth and open it out flat to display it, the whole thing would become distorted and bloated. The face would be out like this. And this has been shown by people just doing tests of painting their face or painting the face of a plaster bust, putting a cloth over it, and then you take it out and it doesn't look lifelike. So however the shroud was created, it must have been absolutely flat at the time. As soon as you realize that, you think, well, it was made to be displayed. It's not a something left over from a burial.
Yes, I mean, another sign that it was made to be displayed is the hands are crossed over the genitals, which would not have happened, if the body was just in a tomb. So
there's lots of things about the image that point to it being, well, people say a fake, a work of human ingenuity, a work of art.
Genius, actually, work of genius.
So it's not a simple fake.
No.
It's a lot cleverer than that. But there are various anomalies of things to do with the way the blood flows. They're perfect, anatomically perfect, which is one of the impressive things about the image. But actually, when you go into them, they're actually too perfect, because the flows, once you pressed a cloth against them, they would become blurred. You wouldn't be able to see them so precisely defined. So it's almost like, because it's made for display, the creator, Leonardo, as we believe, very firmly believe, would, artists often sacrifice actual reality for what looks right, what looks good. So with the blood flows, it's the same.
Yeah.
Anatomically perfect, but slightly too good. And there's all sorts of things like that.
And also the head image was created separately from the front of the body and the back. So there's 3 stages to it. There's a line on about here on the chest, and actually the image stops dead there, and then it picks up again here. So it's actually, and the head is actually too small for the body, proportionately too small for the body, and slightly twisted like that. So it's remarkable. And also the face is, there's no ears, which we discovered that's a function of, using a camera obscura and a lens. Basically the ears on images disappear.
So how would he, if it is a photographic negative, how would he have projected it onto the linen?
It's with camera obscura that as Lynn was talking about, which is it's basically the forerunner of the modern camera. It's a camera without, they've been used back since Roman times to project images onto walls and things. It's like a camera before they invented film. We're saying Leonardo also invented the film as well. So people have been experimenting with these well before Leonardo's time, and it was known as a curiosity. And Leonardo was one of the first to do a scientific description of how camera obscura works, how it projects an image. But he couldn't take that too much further, because in his day, the church looked upon experimenting with the projection of images and the capturing of images as basically sorcery. And there were some examples of people around Leonardo's time, in fact, slightly after Leonardo's time, who projected images with a camera obscura and found the Inquisition knocking on their door. So it's one of those things that if you were interested in this subject in optics, you had to keep it very secret. Which, of course, because some of our critics say, well, if Leonardo invented photography, why didn't he put it in his notebooks? And there was a very good reason why he didn't. I mean, there are some clues in his notebooks. But
also, I mean, he did have a method of fixing the image, because we did it, using materials he would have access to. So, yeah, I mean, it's quite a laborious process.
You were able to, using the materials he would have had, you were able to create a photo negative image on a piece of film?
And in fact we'll send you the images.
We'll send you pictures.
We'll send you pictures.
We've actually got them here, but they don't look too good on camera, but I'll show them to you. But if I don't use them, because
no, we'll send you really good ones. That we did for the BBC actually, and because we did a documentary about this in 1995. So and they're really good.
That's the thing that I can't get around. I mean, I feel like it would have taken like an amazing amount of light to be able to project an image like that.
It is, but sunlight
in Tuscany.
And these images would take hours, maybe all day to be created. And we have to remember, of course, that the image on the Turin shroud, when you look at it with the naked eye, is actually not that good. It wouldn't be that impressive at the time, because it was only really when people first photographed it in the 1890s and looked at the photographic negative. There'd be a lot of younger people watching this wondering what a photographic negative is, but that's what we were used to. And suddenly saw how lifelike it was. That's what made people start taking it seriously. So in some ways, although it created this, Leonardo created this amazing image, a lot of people would have looked at it and said, well, it's not all that,
but the big thing about it at the time was that it was not an obvious fake. There's no paint on it. So it was, a miracle. But actually, going back to your point about light, it's known that people wrote about Leonardo having created a device to make the room light up as if at noonday, at night. And nobody knows what that was. but basically he'd invented some kind of way of lighting up rooms at night, which was incredible, you know.
And he experimented with mirrors to focus the light and the heat. Anything to do with optics. That was his biggest obsession out of all the many things he did. And his obsession with trying to capture an image actually from life. You know, it's known this is what he wanted to do. And then we think the great irony is that because he had to keep this thing secret, what opportunity did he have to display it to people? Well,
yes. So basically, he created the ultimate Christian relic. So the very organization that would have condemned him to the stake for using photography would then look after his great invention throughout the centuries until somebody would come along and recognize it for what it was. And here we are. Yeah.
I mean, do you think if it was Leonardo, do you think he left it as a message for later generations to see?
I mean, we think you know, he would certainly have been commissioned to create the image as the ultimate holy relic because relics made money, you know. So you know, the family that owned it would have, you know, wanted someone to create this relic somehow, and we think Leonardo saw the opportunity to send this message to history so that people would recognize he'd done this thing, and he couldn't talk about it in his lifetime.
I mean, but he was quite secretive anyway, because he kind of had to be, but by nature he was very secretive. But I mean, he was, but actually it was interesting. After he died, the family that owned the shroud sent an emissary to the guy who had all Leonardo's stuff and got one notebook, a specific notebook, and took it away, and instantly, quotes, lost it in their library. So you know, it's anybody's guess what's in it, but we think we know what our guess is. So
Wow, it's so weird. Such a
I mean, the thing about Leonardo is that there's a lot more to him than you learn about at school. You know, I mean, he wasn't an unapproachable genius. He was a very complicated man with strange beliefs, some people would think, and he was at the same time incredibly serious and very funny. He was very witty, very funny, and he was a prankster. He was a famous prankster in his day, and he was a conjurer and an illusionist. He actually did illusions and conjuring for the courts, entertainment. So that mindset, you know, is behind it, you know. And also he was not short of ego, and he was desperate for anything, as you know, to go through the centuries with you know, to carry on his name, to have, you know, and my, you know, goodness, has he done that, you know, with this? Well, potentially, because, you know, we're doing our best to get the message out.
So
we've got some, you know, a lot of really good evidence, and you know, over the years, this book has been revised 3 or 4 times, because we keep finding more and more evidence, like specifically to link Leonardo to the shroud. One of the things that sort of knocked us sideways recently was, you know, the painting of the Salvator Mundi that was recently recognized as a Leonardo. When you take the Salvator Mundi and you overlay that onto the shroud, you map that onto the shroud, the 2 images match up absolutely perfectly.
And we tried all sorts of other images, and they're nowhere near.
They don't. I mean, you look at them you just look at them and you think, no, that's not the same. You know, that won't work. But we actually did it, and they match in such a way that it can't. I mean, it just can't be coincidence. We've tried, you know, we've tried with all sorts of other images. It doesn't work. Which doesn't prove that Leonardo made the shroud, as we always say, but it proves he must have based the painting on the shroud, so he must have been in the same room with it at some point.
Though even the Salvator Mundi, there's debate about whether he actually painted that, or isn't there?
Everything's controversial about that, but well, they say if that's not his, it was by one of his pupils based on his. It's definitely known he painted a Salvator Mundi because it was recorded at the time. They just thought it'd been lost. But you know, even those that say, well, that's not by Leonardo, it's not entirely by Leonardo, they also say, well, it's it was a copy of what he did.
Mm.
So it's a very faithful copy.
Mm.
We think it is the real thing, but
Yeah.
Because there are little clues in there about photography. Which
Yes,
we don't have time to go into.
No,
but
it's little hints in the
it's in the
Salvator
book.
Mundi.
Like what?
well, a couple of things. One, it's strange. These are things that drop into our lap because it's things other people notice. We're reading about the Salvator Mundi, and one Leonardo art expert said there's a weird thing about it, which is that the picture it's slightly out of focus in different places. And he says it represents changes in depth of field.
Mm.
And of course, when you say depth of field, that is a photography term. And you think, why would someone do that in a photograph? The other thing is that the Salvator Mundi is holding a crystal ball, crystal sphere, which is, it's usually a globe there. And well, it's a transparent globe. But again, other art experts looking at it saying from the little detail in there, it's a crystal sphere. Now, we think he would have used in his camera obscura to make the shroud, he would have used not a glass lens because the technology wasn't there. Lenses then were made with crystal. So you've got this image which maps onto the Turin shroud holding a crystal lens with depth of field changes actually in the painting for no apparent reason. So you start to put all that together and you think, I think it's trying to tell us something, it's giving us a clue here. But so it keeps rolling on and on.
There is one point we ought to address because everybody always brings this up and they think we don't think about this, but I mean, honestly, they say, oh no, the Turin shroud was around 100 years before Leonardo was even born. No, the evidence is that was actually a completely different so-called relic from today's so-called relic, because the one in France was such an embarrassingly obvious fake. It was painting that even the local bishop said he knew who'd done it. But of course the whole point about the Turin shroud is that basically there's no paint on it. So it's not the same one.
You're talking about the first historical appearance of the shroud in like 1346.
It's slightly later, but it's around that time, 14th century in France, which is supposed to be the one that's then passed on to Turin. But there are only written descriptions of it, and as Lynn said, basically everybody that looked at it said it's a painting. That was the church's official line. That shroud, when it gets passed to the Savoy family, who are the much more famous ones, actually kind of vanishes from the record for 30 or 40 years. When supposedly they had it, but they just weren't talking about it. It's not being displayed. Then suddenly in the 1490s, it reappears and is being displayed again, and everyone's reaction is entirely different. And this 1494 is first displayed at a town called Vercelli, which is just about 40 or 50 miles from Milan, where guess who was working at that time? The earliest we can be sure that today's shroud existed is 1516, because somebody painted a copy of it. So we know, and that's got all the characteristics. Before 1516, we've only got written descriptions. So although it's supposed to have been around for that long, again, even people that totally accept the shroud being genuine will acknowledge that there's, those early references aren't necessarily to the same relic that's around today. So, and that was actually quite a big landmark for us, because that was when we first started looking at the Leonardo angle, as Lynn said, to eliminate him as a candidate. And we thought, that's easy. The shroud was around long before he was born. And
so
then
forget him.
And then you suddenly realise, actually, that we can't be sure about that. And there is this time when the shroud disappeared, and then the new one.
I mean, it's quite clear that the two shrouds are completely different. One's a blatant painting, and one very much isn't. So yeah,
And it appears in the right place and the right time for
Yeah.
Leonardo.
and we kind of imagine that Leonardo, with his mindset, would be hovering in the shadows, watching the pilgrims, walking past and looking at his great work, getting their reactions.
There is this like faintness of the image, right? That I remember the first time I came across it was Ian Wilson's book. My grandfather had the book, and it was, I saw the picture of it, and to me it looked like a Rorschach's test or something, like with the damages were like a butterfly or so. I couldn't even see the face or the body. I couldn't see anything as a kid, but then you contemplate it and look hard, and it's like the more you study it and the more you look at it, the more seems to be revealed, right? And it's just such a I don't know how to describe it really.
Well, it's certainly, I mean, you're absolutely right, Kip. I mean, certainly the more you look at it, the more you discover, but maybe from an entirely different angle to most people. We did actually discover, for example, the image of the lens on the face, which was quite a moment for us, actually, because we've been trying to get rid of what's called burnout, the image of the actual lens in the middle of the nose of our bust that we were doing. And we were looking and saying, well, Leonardo wouldn't have had that problem. And we looked at the image of the face of the man on the shroud, and there it was, dead center of the face.
So when you replicated it as a photo negative, you were unable to get rid of the lens.
Yeah.
But it seems that there's
Leonardo couldn't do that either. Yes, it's in the dead center of the nose on the face.
There is a circle there.
There's a circle.
And how else? No one else can explain that.
Yeah.
So therefore, most writers about the Shroud just ignore it.
Yeah.
But you take a look, you can see it's there.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it was an annoyance until we realised that it was a huge find. It was a massive clue,
Yeah.
And it's just it's because you're using a very simple lens, not the sort of compound lenses we have in cameras today. You just do get this effect where you kind of get a bit of the extra light coming through in the center, and that really was the moment when we thought we've got it. That's how the Shroud was done.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you, like, the extreme skeptic in me thinks that, why, I don't know. To me, it's as if somebody tortured and crucified and killed somebody and wrapped them up in a shroud.
Well, no,
but you say
not necessarily. Not necessarily. Because the thing is, Leonardo was an anatomist, and he had special dispensation basically to do anatomy at work, investigations on dead bodies. So he had dead bodies to practice with. And as we say, the face, we believe, is his, but all of the front and all of the back belongs to a dead body that was, I mean, basically the crucifixion wounds were inflicted on. So yes, I mean, it is somebody who's gone through that, but not in life.
So your theory is that he inflicted these wounds on a dead body, took a picture of it, and projected that image onto the linen.
Yeah, projected the image, captured the image, on the cloth.
Onto the cloth.
Onto the cloth, yeah.
And then put his own face onto it, which is why it's out of proportion. It's too
and
small.
Slightly it took the wrong angle.
But
and there's that line under it, demarcation line.
So because he liked to put himself in all of his works.
Oh yes, he's he's in the Last Supper. He's like Alfred Hitchcock always put himself in his movies. Leonardo likes to put himself in his paintings. It's
a compelling story. It's a centuries-old debate that can seem to agree on.
You can definitely say that.